Nirvana Prakarana, The Transcendence, Chapter 12, The Story of Kacha. It was spring, the time when cuckoos fill the atmosphere with their music, when the mango trees are in bloom and there is joy in the air. It was more so for a small group of people who considered themselves privileged as they were the disciples of an enlightened guru. Their guru had come to his Indian ashrama on a short visit after almost 3 years, and they could get a satsanga or the holy company that intensified their aspiration for the life divine. They all had left their mundane duties to be recipient of his nectar-like words which appeased their spiritual hunger. And why not? For it was he who had tickled their spiritual aspiration. It was he who had taken the message of hope across the seas to the struggling humanity in other countries. He spoke to them directly and simply in a language comprehensible to even common people involved in their day-to-day problems. The way in which he carried himself, his gait, voice, and mood expressed his enlightenment. He had 3 ashramas in the United States, 1 in Australia, 1 in New Zealand. All their locations had breathtaking natural surroundings which spoke highly of his sense of beauty and love for nature. He had 3 in India and was intending to start more so as to reach more people. It appeared that he had lost all distinctions of country, religion, race, and status. It was quite touching that afternoon to observe the devotees reach the ashram and meet their master. There was respect, love, a complaint, for he had not come to India in the past 3 years, and of course, genuine happiness in their eyes. In a way, the spring appeared to have manifested externally from their hearts. After the excitement of the reunion, they all met in the prayer hall where they eagerly awaited their master to begin his satsanga. He entered the hall in his inimitable, graceful and slow gait and occupied his seat. It was hot and humid, as it usually is at that part of the year. The master remarked that it was very hot and the manager should arrange to provide air conditioners in the prayer hall. Only this remark helped the devotees to become aware of the physical climate of which they had been totally oblivious. A few of them were surprised, for seldom did he remark on the physical discomfort, and he had always helped them rise above it. Then he talked about his ashramas in the United States, Australia, and New Zealand, and of his foreign devotees. Maybe the devotees were expecting too much from their master, but some of them had discovered that in these times the master was involved more in taking care of the ashrama properties than on the devotees or their spiritual welfare. This is not a stray case when it comes to the men of religion and spirituality. The gullible people who have habitual respect for the ochre-clothed monks have been exploited repeatedly, and yet many, if not most of us, have short memories as we get attracted to those who renounce in the name of God time and again. The reason for this is simple. A man who can give up the comforts and security of his home and who holds aspiration dearer to his heart than mere survival is rare indeed. This thought has been ingrained in the psyche of this country. That is why Swami Vivekananda said repeatedly that renunciation and service is the twin ideal of our country. If we channelize her in that direction, everything will be taken care of. Unfortunately, renunciation is taken to be only the physical distancing of oneself from the sense objects or relationships. This very shallow understanding has brought about many a catastrophe in the lives of seekers, like the Swami in the above episode. The reason for the above behavior of the monk is not only due to the shallow understanding, but a facade of wisdom due to the intellectual understanding of Vedanta, as well as the proficiency in the art of public speaking and presentation. Just by being an effective speaker on topics of spirituality need not make one really wise. In fact, in many cases, it becomes a hindrance due to the pride. Even if one does not venture into teaching spirituality, one still has the risk of stagnation and downfall with the wrong understanding of renunciation. First of all, one faces the risk of insulation from the society as one tends to become an escapist. Second thing is that in avoiding the things and choosing seclusion, one may have to tackle the very things one left later in life. A story told by Sri Ramakrishna illustrates this. There was a sannyasi whose only possession was 2 pairs of loincloths. One day, a mouse nibbled at one piece, so the holy man kept a cat to protect his loincloths from the mouse. Then he had to keep a cow to supply milk for the cat. Later, he had to engage a servant to look after the cow. Gradually, the number of his cows multiplied. He acquired pastures and farmland. He had to engage number of servants. Thus, he became, in course of time, a sort of a landlord. And last of all, he had to take a wife to look after his big household. One day, one of his friends, another monk, happened to visit him and was surprised to see his altered circumstances. When asked the reason, the holy man said, "It is all for the sake of a piece of loincloth." The above story may be an extreme example, but many times persons walk at least halfway through. Their time is consumed by the maintenance of the ashrama property and accounts. Another thing, which is more subtle and hence stronger, is the holier than thou attitude, which perhaps is the most catastrophic event for a seeker. If we just analyze our behavior, we find that invariably it is the ego which is responsible for all the problems that plague the society. The interpersonal relationships, the class wars begin, continue, and even end due to the egos. Someone's ego is uncompromising, while another's is quite accommodative. In some other cases, both egos are adamant. Why? Even the nations have their own egos. One of the greatest problems with this ghost called ego is that it can and does survive on anything as well as nothing. For instance, we are aware that the ego gets strengthened by flattery, indulgence, and involvement. All these are available to us when we live in society and our so-called down-to-earth lives. But it also gets strengthened, perhaps to a greater extent, when one leaves everything, either through withdrawal or measured and practiced non-involvement. Because then it says, I do not care for any attention. I can live on my own. But all along, the I goes on expanding. If one chases it out of the front door, it comes back through the back door, if not the window. All it demands is a little attention to itself. It survives and thrives only on attention. The most important aspect of sadhana or spiritual practice is to become aware of this fact and to slowly start eliminating this attention. The story under discussion tries to bring home this very important point. Sage Vasishta said that like Shikidwaja, Kacha, the son of Brahaspati, the Acharya or the teacher of gods, too followed the same path to reach the most exalted state. To which Rama requested the sage to narrate him the story of Kacha. Vasishtha replied, Muni Kacha, who had the wisdom of subtle things, approached his father to know the means of enlightenment and the path he should tread. The Devaguru said that wide ocean of samsara can be crossed only by the incomparable power of total renunciation, involving great effort and responsibility. At these words of his father, Kacha retired to the forest, renouncing everything, and lived there for 8 years. At the end of this period, Brihaspati visited him. Kacha approached him with due respect and poured out his heart that in spite of a life of renunciation for 8 years, his mind was still sorrowful. To this doubt of Kacha, Brihaspati said that he should give up everything. When the father left, Kacha left wearing even the bark of the trees and roamed about naked and total abstinence. Again, after 3 years, he approached his father and said that in spite of leaving everything, he had not known peace. This is one of the most common problems that are encountered by seekers during their journey, because many of us take even spirituality as an object of achievement and sadhana to be an investment. This is to be understood carefully. In the world of objects, it is inevitable that one has to invest one's time and effort to achieve something, be it an object or a position of power. In the process, one has to court anxiety and tension. One has to necessarily evoke the ego, because it is the ego which is an achiever. A creature of habits that man is, he continues this attitude even in the spiritual plane. Earlier, he used to seek sense objects or the material fulfillment in lieu of his effort. Now he seeks peace of mind and spiritual experiences, not realizing that by this he is again courting anxiety and tension. One more reason, and perhaps a very strong reason, is when a person renounces the world of objects, he is not convinced that there is no relationship between the happiness and the sense objects, though he leaves them in search of lasting peace and happiness. This innate doubt remains even when he invests his effort with an expectation. Then there is the disappointment with consequent sorrow. It is also true that such persons, and that constitutes most of us, remember what they have left all along, which proves that what has been left continues to be important. Though the objects are renounced physically, they continue to remain in the mind, perhaps a little more strongly. If the renunciation is positive, then there is no place for sorrow, as the objects have fallen off the mind. Brihaspati said, "The great opine that the mind is all, and that its mastery leads to the renunciation of all. Through such mental renunciation, one can free oneself from all pain." So saying, he left the scene, leaving Kacha to himself, who contemplated on his father's words. He thought that he had been inquiring as to what mind is, and had not yet come to any understanding. If the body with its indriyas is different from mind, the effort to separate them is useless, as they are already separate. When he approached his respected father with doubts, Brihaspati replied that the wise who have understood what mind is say that it is nothing other than ahankara. The idea of I exists in all creatures. Kacha observed that it is very difficult to avoid the idea of I. How can one destroy this hard rock? Brihaspati replied that it is not very difficult to remove this idea. What one has to learn is to only change the vision. If one meditates on one and only principle, which is non-dual, endless and supreme jnana, one is instantly freed from the ghost of ahankara. Just like dust, which can never rise out of waters, or waters out of fire, ahankara cannot arise out of the eternal tattva jnana, the non-dual, is not subject to forms generated by space, time, etc., and hence beyond suffering. In Kaivalya, the final liberation, ahankara is known to be unreal. Therefore, Brihaspati added, one should neither think of giving it up or taking it up. Like no one tries to hold the non-existent horns of the hare. Rama asked a doubt. How did the element of otherness manifest in the Brahman? Vasishtha replied that the emergence of concepts of diversity, which are unreal, generates rebirth, but the realization of non-dual reality without doubt is the freedom from rebirth. One may feel, after reading this story, that it is easier said than done. The jnana vision, which this story hints at, cannot be explained because all doubts and problems exist only at the level of mind and ahankara. However, the compassionate sages who had such vision wanted everyone to have it because it is not only everyone's birthright, but everyone can have it. The only condition they ever put is to wake up from the sleep of ahankara and its manifestations. Most of us are asleep in some deep slumber, some others in lighter sleep. Sages like Vasishtha are ringing alarms to wake us up. A Zen master was waking up from sleep, called his disciple and asked him to analyze a dream he had seen in his sleep. The disciple, however, brought him warm water to wash the face and kept it in front of the master. After the ablution, the disciple took away the vessel. The master called his second disciple and again repeated what he had told the first disciple. The disciple, instead of speaking, brought a cup of tea and placed it in front of the master. The master laughed joyously, for the disciples were alert and had learned. The fact that the master was asking the disciples to analyze the dream itself showed that the master was still in his sleep. For on waking up from sleep, the dream is irrelevant. So the first disciple brought water. When the master still insisted on the analysis, the second disciple brought him the tea. In Zen tradition, tea stands for awareness. All the descriptions are in a way analysis of dreams in the form of further dreams. They are only means for waking up like water or tree. Whether to wake up or not is left entirely to us.